Is the US military ready for a war in cyberspace? Many experts say no, causing some to call for the creation of a brand new branch of the military, the Cyber Force. Imagine a bomb that can wipe out every major system across the United States. I'm talking water, power, hydroelectric dams, oil pipelines, emergency dispatch systems, traffic lights, banks, you name it, and it can do all this without an explosion in practically complete silence. This is not a physical bomb, but a digital one that is launched over wires in cyberspace, and the US has already been hit with several, especially the United States military, and the pace and severity of the attacks is picking up. Unfortunately, the way the military defends against this threat and conducts its own cyber warfare is fractured, possibly ineffective, and leaves us all vulnerable. I'm Kyle and you're watching Task and Purpose. Thank you for joining us here today, where we're going to talk all about US cyber operations and if we actually do need to take some heat off the Space Force and create an even nerdier branch of the military. Because this impacts all of us. You are watching this over the internet, right? But first, let's talk about Odoo, because running a business is hard enough. You shouldn't need 5 different platforms just to keep things moving. Odoo brings it all into one place: your website, your inventory, your sales tools, all fully integrated and connected. Need a website? Pick a theme, drag and drop what you need, and you're up and running like that. Odoo's built-in AI even helps write your product descriptions and summaries so you don't waste your time sitting there staring at a blank screen. Behind the scenes, inventory is just as simple. You can see what's in stock, what's shipping, and what's delayed, all from one dashboard. Automate vendor reminders, pay receipts, and set delivery schedules with just a few clicks. It even syncs automatically with your e-commerce and sales apps. With Odoo, everything works together so you can spend less time managing tools and more time growing your business. Start today at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com. Your first app is free, and we would like to thank Odoo for sponsoring this episode. I'm excited to talk about this today because, while I do not like to brag, I did graduate summa cum laude with a degree in cybersecurity and networking from a very prestigious local community college after the Marine Corps. I obviously do not use that elite associate's degree to do this job, but I spend a lot of my free time still reading, learning, and talking about it, so let's get right to it. To start, we should define cyber warfare. So, cyber warfare is warfare that takes place in cyberspace. Not to be a smartass, but that really is all it is. Like conventional warfare, cyber has reconnaissance, objectives, payloads, offensive and defensive operations, special operations, and everything else that a good old-fashioned war has. As a result, that line between cyber warfare and traditional warfare is becoming more blurred. Usually, cyber operations cross into war when those operations no longer have intelligence collection as an objective and instead lean on destruction to get the job done. But that line is getting harder to define. Cyber soldiers can spray and pray with something like a denial of service attack, where millions of packets of information are launched at a server with the aim of overloading and crashing it. Or they can be precise, like a 2019 operation that targeted Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps control system of its rocket and missile launchers. This one was in retaliation for shooting down a US drone and hitting some fuel tankers, and is still classified. Whether carpet bombing a server with packets of information or a scalpel incision of a launch control system, cyber operations almost always have real-world impacts, and those reverberate through every aspect of our national defense. I really want to stress here how important this is. Look around. What isn't controlled in some way by the internet? Think about it. So, how do we, the United States, do cyber war stuff? The short answer is not very well, but it's still really damn good, but we are all over the place. Right now, according to the Pentagon, there are about 225,000 service members and civilians working in cyberspace across the Defense Department. The Government Accountability Office, though, says that there are only 61,000, but who's counting? However many there are, most of them build, operate, patch, maintain, and do routine security for the 4 million computers and billions of IP addresses that make up the larger DoD Information Network, or DoDIN, which I'm just going to call DoDIN because that's a fun word to say. Some of those cyber operators go out and do the secret squirrel stuff too, but mostly it's the grunt work of keeping the network from collapsing on itself. Each of the branches manages its own information networks and defends them against run-of-the-mill cybersecurity threats. They also recruit and train cyber troops, which is called Force Generation, and present them to US Cybercom, which is a combatant command that provides cyber support to troops conducting real-world operations. Cybercom is a lot like SOCOM, at least that's the general idea behind it, but we will talk more about that in a bit. With a roughly $3 billion budget, Cybercom has units everywhere and a fancy operations center it shares in Maryland with the National Security Agency, where they oversee cyber forces around the world. There are generally 3 different flavors of cyberspace operations that Cybercom conducts. First up is offensive operations. These involve taking the fight to the enemy in cyberspace, usually by breaking into enemy networks to mess with their communication systems, knock out nuclear enrichment centrifuges, disable air defenses, and other fun things like that. And then you have defense, of course. If a system comes under attack, Cybercom is responsible for defending it. They'll often come in and help plug the lines to kick out the intruders and clean up whatever mess they left behind. Lastly, they secure the military's network in advance of a threat. This is the equivalent of getting put on a sandbag-filling working party to build up the berm of a fob, but in this case the fob is incomprehensibly large. And just like a sandbag-filling working party, this job is absolutely essential but grossly underappreciated. You never hear about the thousands of attacks that are defeated each and every single day in cyberspace by these people. Truth is, defending cyberspace is just impossible. You'll never be untouchable. Attackers only have to get it right or get lucky just one time, whereas defenders have to get it right and or get lucky every single time without fail. The odds are just not in the defender's favor. Given this massive mission at hand, these 61,000 to 225,000 warriors of the interwebs do incredible work. But the landscape that they're working in is changing. Attack surfaces, as they're called, are expanding ever wider as more and more systems are connected to the network. Adversaries like Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are becoming more sophisticated. Dedicated hacking groups that we call Advanced Persistent Threats are more regularly made up of military members in these countries. These APTs often have funny names, like Sandworm, which represents APT-44. This is thought to be a Russian group that is part of the GRU's military unit 74455. They might have a funny name, but they do serious damage. Sandworm is strongly suspected to be responsible for the 2015 attack on Ukraine's electrical grid that knocked power out for 230,000 people for several hours. Or take Volt Typhoon, for example, a Chinese state-sponsored APT that's been caught breaking into US Navy systems on Guam. That's a pretty important US outpost with pretty important systems like Aegis. Both of these are great examples of how cyber can be used to shape kinetic military operations and what Cybercom was made to handle. And of course, you have the non-military groups like the National Security Agency and the Central Intelligence Agency, which have a narrower intelligence focus but fancier tools to work with. Sometimes service members will also often work with those agencies in cyber operations. There is a lot going on here and lots of interested parties playing in the cyber sandbox, which complicates everything. The US government's approach to cybersecurity in general is not great. The Center for Strategic and International Studies said the US has a huge attack surface and weak domestic defense due to its scattered patchwork of protection. They point out that this is mostly left up to private entities, lacking a strong framework guiding US cyber defense. Put another way, our shit's a mess. As we mentioned, each branch recruits and trains cyber troops known as Force Generation, while Cybercom puts them in the fight or force employment. But Cybercom hasn't really laid out a solid framework for how the services ought to train cyber troops so that they're ready for work at Cybercom. That's bad because Cybercom's Cyber Mission Force, about 6,000 or so people who actually perform cyberspace operations, is designed to be modular, where teams from different services can swap in and do the same job. Even infantry, pilots, refuelers, admins, cooks, maintainers, and everyone in between are trained using many of the same or really similar standard operating procedures for this reason. And then the ones that we actually do manage to train don't tend to stick around very long. At a certain experience level, civilian jobs offer way more money, especially for the enlisted. And once they do leave, they are not easy to replace. One Air Force cyber officer named John Cobb wrote in an opinion piece for War on the Rocks that it takes a few years to train a junior cyber operator or analyst, and about a decade to become fully proficient. It makes sense because that's about the same time it takes a fighter pilot or a special operator to reach full proficiency. And with the ever-evolving reality in cyber operations, it's very easy to get left behind. Since not many of those experienced cyber troops choose to stick around, the result is what Cobb described as a perpetual amateurism problem that's creating severe burnout and retention issues. In August, RAND published a report saying that the Defense Department can't recruit and retain the right people for cyber jobs, that the people making resourcing decisions don't understand how cyber works, and that a lot of cyber troops aren't even fully trained or qualified before they show up to operational units. The Center for Strategic and International Studies flagged similar challenges in a report that came out in September. They said that too little is invested in cyber professionals, especially among the mid-career folks who do operational planning, and that planning is split among 5 services, each with its own approach to cyber, which leads to an incoherent strategy. Now, as we teased before, Cybercom is often compared to SOCOM and how it is structured. Special operations encompasses a lot of different domains, so it makes sense for the services to train different types of commandos who then bring their unique skill sets to the field. You have things like weathermen in the Air Force, the Army has Green Berets, Marines have Raiders, and the Navy has SEALs that write all about it. Put simply, SOCOM actually tells the services exactly what they need, and then they get it. It doesn't take a computer genius to realize that having an incoherent cyber warfare strategy these days is not a great idea. But to be fair, steps are being taken to remedy this right now. Cybercom has implemented the Persistent Cyber Training Environment, or PCTE. This is designed to let cyber operators, from individuals to full teams, train, rehearse missions, and run joint exercises in a shared virtual environment. Think of it like a multiplayer sim for hacking, defense, and digital combat. In 2023, they also rolled out the DoD 8140 Cyber Workforce Qualification Program. They hope that this will standardize how the military identifies, trains, certifies, and tracks cyber personnel across both military and civilian roles. It replaces the older 8570 policy and expands beyond just IT and security roles to include all cyber-related work, from offensive operations to network maintenance. So we are taking steps to fix the problem, and to be fair, comparing Cybercom to SOCOM isn't quite fair. SOCOM also got off to a rocky start, but through the generations they've improved standardization and clearly communicated what they need. Now they're a force that just has no equal. But we may not have generations to get this figured out. The thing with cyber bombs is that most of them could be in place right now, as I say this, just dangling over our heads, ready to explode at the press of a button thousands of miles away. The situation does appear dire, and when that's the case, people start thinking about drastic solutions. To supercharge efforts in fixing this mess, many experts are calling for an independent cyber force that would be organized under the Department of the Army, kind of like how the Marine Corps is under the Department of the Navy, the Space Force is under the Department of the Air Force. They're all separate branches, they all have their own thing, but they're just underneath them. Advocates say that a dedicated cyber force is the only way to fix the problems of the current approach, and they make some good points. As CSIS wrote, a specialized cyber force means the other services can secure their own systems, networks, and weaponry, and leave the offensive capabilities and big picture defensive capabilities to the experts. The way many picture it, a separate cyber force would not be responsible for all cyberspace across the military. Each service would still build and do basic defense of its own information networks. Instead, the cyber force would focus on organizing, training, and equipping troops for those specialized skills that Cybercom and the other combatant commanders need in order to collect intelligence, go on the offensive, or think big picture defensive stuff in cyberspace. That unique focus would keep the cyber force light and lean. The Foundation for the Defense of Democracies estimated it would start at about 10,000 members and grow over time. For comparison, the smallest service today is the Space Force with about 14,000 members, but it's growing. Supporters say that if a cyber force is launched, it needs to be able to attract and retain top cyber talent, which means it may not look like your typical military service with uniform inspections, field exercises, and PT tests. Already, leaders have been using things like direct commissioning to attract this talent. Direct commissioning is where a professional like a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, or a cyber operator join the military with a little different path. They won't necessarily go to boot camp, they usually have an abbreviated thing. They'll come in at a higher rank that's more commensurate with their level of civilian qualifications, and they don't really have to deal with all the nonsense that your regular junior enlisted dirt person might have to. Some say that the force, even our current iteration, ought to make it easier for troops to serve in a part-time capacity so that they can get the experience in the fast-moving civilian cyber industry and then share it with the defense industry as well. The Space Force is already setting an example here. Instead of the traditional split between active duty and reserve, which is a pain in the ass for troops to switch between, they're using a part-time, full-time construct, specifically so that Guardians can have more flexibility for professional development or things like having a family. It's still a pretty new idea that they're testing out, but it could become a Cyberforce model. The bottom line here is that we have some big issues around how we conduct cyber operations in the military and not a ton of time to figure it out. Lots of people have lots of different ideas, but right now I'm curious what you all think about in the comments. Should we do a cyber force? Do we need another branch of the military? Do we need to just sit all the branches down and say, hey, figure out your cyber training? Should we just offload this to the private sector, or do we just stop talking about computers because they are for nerds? Whatever it is, let us know in the comments. David Roza wrote this script, and I threw my own 2 cents in there every once in a while, and Savvy edited the video. I decided I'm not going to run my mouth too much at the end. I'm just going to tell you all thank you for being here. I really appreciate the support. Like, subscribe, alerts, all those things. There's not a whole lot else to talk about. I just want to say thank you all for being here and for all the support over what is now about 6 months I've been in this chair. It has been a lot of work, but it's been really fun, and you guys are great to hang out with in the comments, so I appreciate that. Anyways, I am Kyle, your friendly ginger producer man. You are all dismissed, and I will see you next time. Thank you for being here.